Good day, future teachers. Welcome to Edo 259 P3 Third Week English Rationalization. Again, I am Monica Apepe, and for today's video, we will be covering 5 major English subjects, which are the English 155 Teaching and Assessment of Grammar, English 156 English Programs and Policies in Multilingual Societies, English 542 are the Technology for Teaching and Learning 2, English 162, Contemporary, Popular, and Emergent Literature, and English 157, Speech and Theater Arts. So let us start with English 155, Teaching and Assessment of Grammar, item number 1. Miss Felicia wants to find out her students' familiarity about the new topic she will be discussing with them. Which of the following techniques should she use to fulfill her purpose? The options are letter A, misconception check, letter B, background knowledge probe, letter C, minute paper, and letter D, empty outlines. So the correct answer for this item is letter B, background knowledge probe. For the rationalization, let us first define what is background knowledge probe. So it is a short, simple questionnaires prepared by the instructors for the use at the beginning of a course, at the start of a new unit or lesson, or prior to introducing an important new topic. This is used to help teachers determine the most effective starting point for a given lesson and the most appropriate level at which to begin new instruction. The background knowledge probe is designed to collect feedback on students' prior learning, including knowledge or beliefs that may hinder or block further understanding. Students complete a short survey prepared by the instructor at the beginning of a course, the start of a new unit or lesson, or before introducing a new topic. So that is background knowledge probe. Moving on with item number 2. Which tool is used to find out whether two variables have a relationship or not? The options are letter A, coefficient of correlation, letter B, measure of variability, letter C, measure of central tendency, and letter D, t-test. So the correct answer is letter A, coefficient of correlation. For our rationalization, correlation coefficients are indicators of the strength of a linear relationship between two different variables, the x and y variables. A linear correlation coefficient that is greater than 0 indicates a positive relationship. A value that is less than 0 signifies a negative relationship. Finally, a value of 0 indicates no relationship between the two variables x and y. Correlation means that there is a relationship between two or more variables, such as ice cream and consumption and crime. But this relationship does not necessarily imply cause and effect. When two variables are correlated, it simply means that as one variable changes, so does the other. We can measure correlation by calculating a statistic known as correlation coefficient. A correlation coefficient is a number from -1 to +1 that indicates the strength and direction of the relationship between variables. So the correlation coefficient is usually represented by the letter R or the small letter r. So that is correlation coefficients. Next, number 3. When a teacher is assigned in a new class to teach and he wants to determine the extent of knowledge and skills of the pupils in the class, what is the best thing for him or her to do? The options are letter A, consult the guidance counselor, letter B, administer a diagnostic test, letter B, observe carefully the pupils, and letter D, ask his fellow teachers about the standing of each pupil. The answer for this question is letter B, administer a diagnostic test. For our rationalization, a diagnostic assessment is a form of pre-assessment that allows a teacher to determine his students' individual strengths, weaknesses, knowledge, and skills prior to instruction. It is primarily used to diagnose student difficulties and to guide lesson and curriculum planning. So in education, a diagnostic test helps identify a student's learning problems so the teachers can provide instruction to remedy those problems. A quality diagnostic assessment doesn't take long. Typically, it is around an hour and it can be tailored to the individual student or even grade level. They can be administered in either a paper and pencil or electronic format. They are a logical follow-up when there are concerns about a student and more information is needed. So like any formative assessment, the goal is to use the data to create a plan of action. This allows the teacher to move forward with effective instruction and identify where to monitor student progress. So that is diagnostic assessment, which is a form of a pre-assessment for the students. Next, we have English 156, English Programs and Policies and Multilingual Societies, item number 1. Jessa has the ability to speak and understand only one language. What is she called? So the options are letter A, bilingual, letter B, biliterate, letter C, monolingual, and letter D, multilingual. So the answer for this question is letter C, monolingual. So monolingual is used to describe someone who can speak or understand only one language. It can also mean written in, spoken in, or involving only one language. So if, say for example, a person who only speaks English. So it is a perfect example of someone who is a monolingual. So monolingual is speaking only one language. Next, number 2, Teacher Jagu incorporates the visually oriented features of deaf culture in deaf teaching children. What strategy in literacy instruction with bilingual deaf students is she using? The options are letter A, allow translation, letter B, incorporation of culture, letter C, motivation and self-concept, and letter D, speak then read. The answer for this item is letter B, incorporation of culture. For our rationalization, in philosophy of pedagogy, approaches and techniques are based on the belief that the value of transmitting culture and history at school is equivalent to the home-based cultural transmission process. It is important to recognize that the incorporation of history is equally important to culture itself, according to Moet of 2011 and DeGarnaro and Brown of 2008. So instruction in the classroom concerning culture must review its history to better understand how culture has evolved through time and define certain cultural norms and behaviors. So cultural norms and behaviors are often not defined among deaf people, specifically in primary and secondary education, according to Parasnis of 1997. So it is probably true that some deaf history and culture is being taught. A museum or archive room is established at some schools for the deaf. Assemblies might be held focusing on deaf adults. Elective courses might be offered that teach history of the deaf, but this does not constitute incorporation of the non-material of history and culture in the academic classroom. The argument is based on the fact that the existing curriculum is based on famous, well-known deaf individuals and basic cultural elements and traditions being taught outside the academic classroom, according to Carroll and Mather of 1998. So the foundation of incorporating culture and history was based on by education that provides a door of opportunity for interactions with two histories and cultures, namely hearing and deaf. The actions between deaf children to develop a sense of pride in being deaf, as well as preparing them for full involvement in both worlds. So that is incorporation of culture. Moving on with item number 3, Principal Choi is thinking about implementing a bilingual education form which aims to soften the shock of changing the language use of children by teaching in sheltered or simplified English, or pulling language minority students out of classes to study the majority language of or medium of instruction itself. Which bilingual education type should be considered? The options are letter A, mainstream, letter B, segregationist, letter C, submersion, and letter D, transitional. So the answer for this item is letter C, submersion. So submersion is a common method for educating minority groups. It's a widely criticized approach because it places learners in ordinary classrooms where the majority speaks English. The idea is that when your students are thrown in such environments, they are forced to learn English to understand what is going on around them and communicate. A nickname for this approach is sink or swim. Learners get little to no support, and it's up to them to find a way to catch up and keep up with the rest. Example, Maria would not get to switch between Spanish and English. She has to figure out how to talk about her favorite book in English because all her classmates only speak English. So submersion programs simply plunge students abruptly into classrooms where their native language is not seen as fit to use, and the medium of instruction is foreign to them, so they involuntarily sink or swim. So among the drawbacks, they miss regular class content that are further isolated from mainstream students. So another example is the English-only policy for English students. So it is very common example for this type of method in speaking or learning an English language. Next, we have the English 542, Technology for Teaching and Learning 2, item number 1. What important aspect that future language educators must prepare now for their upcoming teaching career to be successful? The options are letter A, lesson plans, B, use of technology, letter C, test questionnaire, and letter D, curriculum. The correct answer is letter B, use of technology. For the rationalization, technology in language learning within educational centers is not the future, but the present of education. The use of new technology in the classroom has become the perfect complement to mastering or gaining command of a language, and English courses accompanied by technological support are the most effective and attractive to students who want to be successful in their learning. Educational technology today is advantageous for teachers in so many ways. Traditional education is not so efficient anymore, and teachers need to motivate their students more than ever when presenting any material in the classroom. Books are taking a back seat, and new technology means that classes can be much richer in content and more participative than before. So the ability to not only learn about the new educational gadgets that will help students learn better and faster, but to also have the ability to know how to use and implement the gadget within the classroom is an essential skill of a 21st century educator. An effective educator will have the know-how and the wherewithal of how to efficiently implement and incorporate technology into the classroom in a way that will be productive for all students. Next, number 2, the following concepts anchor the K-12 language, arts, and multiliteracy curriculum except letter A, all languages are interrelated and interdependent. Letter B, language acquisition and learning is an active process that begins at birth and continues throughout life. Letter C, learning requires meaning. And letter D, none of the above. The correct answer for this item is letter D, none of the above. For the rationalization, the concepts that anchored the K-12 language, arts, and multiliteracy curriculum are the following. So, first, all languages are interrelated and interdependent. Second, language acquisition and learning is an active process that begins at birth and continues throughout life. Third, learning requires meaning. Fourth, learners can learn about language and how to use it effectively through their engagement with and study of texts. Next, successful language learning involves viewing, listening, speaking, reading, and writing activities. Next, language learning involves recognizing, accepting, valuing, and building on students' existing language competence, including the use of non-standard forms of the language and extending the range of language available to the students. So, those concepts mentioned are the concepts that anchor the K-12 language, arts, and multiliteracy curriculum. Next, the context of this item is catered to the needs of which generation? Letter A, Generation Z. Letter B, Generation Y. Letter C, Gen X. And letter D, Baby Boomers. The correct answer is letter A, Generation Z. For the rationalization, Generation Z is the generation reaching adulthood in the second grade of the 21st century, perceived as being familiar with the internet from a very young age. So understanding Generation Z's unique characteristics will help higher education educators rethink what they are doing in their classrooms. We need to become conscious about our students' learning needs. Although it may not be possible to work individually with each and every student, but we can try to understand their learning needs and implement new ideas. Our new generation needs more than that. They need a real-life knowledge that can be related to their job area. So Generation Z is digital, and we, as professors, can have access to the digital world. So, let us become more skilled in different types of devices, programs, and applications that can be integrated into our classrooms or into our classes. So, we have to develop activities that are related to the course and at the same time are meaningful to our students. So, moving on with the subject English 160, Contemporary, Popular, and Emergent Literature. Item number 1, which of the following refers to the literature created from the imagination, not presented as fact, though it may be based on a true story or situation? The options are letter A, fiction, letter B, non-fiction, letter C, memoir, letter D, biography. So the correct answer for this item is letter A, fiction. For our rationalization, fiction refers to the literature created from the imagination, not presented as fact, though it may be based on a true story or situation. So in literature, fiction encompasses written works that are defined by narratives or stories that are created, invented, and made up by the writer. So essentially, fictional works feature elements such as plot, characters, setting, and theme. These elements can be literal, conventional, and follow formulas such as in works of genre fiction. They can also be artistic, symbolic, and unstructured, such as in works of literary fiction. The fictional works primarily take the form of novels, novellas, and short stories. So that is fiction. Next, number 2. Who is the main character in the story Remember the Duck? Letter A, little boy. Letter B, grandma. Letter C, father. Letter D, old beggar. The correct answer is letter A, the little boy. For our rationalization, the short story Remember the Duck is an old short story told to kids with a moral lesson. It is about a little boy who visited his grandmother along with his older sister. When he was playing with his slingshot, he accidentally hit Square-Headed Duck, and because of fear and panic, he immediately hit the duck, but his sister saw everything that happened. So in order for him not to be scolded of his grandmother, if she'll know, his sister made an agreement. Her sister will not tell their grandmother what happened about the duck, but he needs to do all his sister's chores. The little boy did all at the end, but the grandmother know what happened and chose to be silent until the little boy will confess what happened. At the end of the story, the grandmother forgave him for what happened. So the story is all about forgiveness and honesty, which was led by the little boy. Next, item number 3. Which of the following is said to be often features hybrid and diasporic subjects, foregrounding the historical, spatial, and performative conditioning of subjectivity in the wake of modernism's fracture of the unitary, rational, and self-founding Cartesian subject? Letter A, contemporary literature. Letter B, biography. Letter C, spoken poetry. And letter D, personal narratives. So the correct answer for this item is letter A, contemporary literature. For the rationalization, so contemporary literature is said to often features hybrid and diasporic subjects, foregrounding the historical, spatial, and performative conditioning of subjectivity in the wake of modernism's fracture of the unitary, rational, and self-founding Cartesian subject. So contemporary literature is a literature with its setting generally after World War II. It may be classified according to a variety of systems, including language and genre. It is a subgenre of romance novels, generally with the setting after World War II. So it is a literary in the form of work, a story, or a novel. So that is contemporary literature. Last subject, we have the English 157, the speech and theater arts. Number 1, it is a famous traditional theater of northern India. It is said that this style was developed from Bhagat form of theater, which is approximately 400 years old. The options are letter A, Jatra or Hatra, letter B, Ramlila, letter C, Swang, and letter D, Nauntanki. The correct answer is letter D, Nauntanki. Nautanki. Alright. For our rationalization, Nautanki is a famous traditional theater of northern India. It is said that this style was developed from Bhagat form of theater, which is approximately 400 years old. So the Nauntaki performances of northern India entertain their audiences with often ribald and profane stories. rooted in the peasant society of pre-modern India. This theater vibrates with the lively dancing, pulsating drum beats, and full-throated singing. So that is the Untaki, originated in the theater of northern India. Number 2, this theatrical direction was popular among the commons. Performances were given at the marketplaces or in taverns. The options are letter A, Black Theater, letter B, Women's Theater, letter C, Kunshan Theater, and letter D, Ian Theater. So the correct answer is letter D, Ian Theater. For our rationalization, Ian Theater assumed daily lives of ordinary people and historical events as a basis of their performances. This theatrical direction was popular among the commons. Performances were given at the marketplaces or in taverns. The most famous troupes of that period appear on its stage. So this theatrical direction was popular among the commons, and performances were given at the marketplaces or in taverns. So these type of performances are commonly seen in the marketplaces, portraying daily lives of ordinary people. Next, number 3. These were popular during the Zhou or the Chu dynasty, 166 to 221 BC. They were divided into two groups: the Wu dances performed by men and she dances performed by women. So the options are letter A, Wuxi dance, letter B, play, letter C, chorus dances, and letter D, lyric dances. Correct answer is letter C, chorus dances. So chorus dances were popular during the Zhou dynasty. They were divided into two groups, which are the Wu dances performed by men and she dances performed by women. So besides religious rituals, there were less ceremonial types of performances, such as comic numbers performed by clowns and dwarves, as well as displays of acrobatic skills. So this type of performances can be mostly seen in carnivals or clowns performing in a carnival. So I guess that would be all for today's video. So here are my references via taken online, and that would be all for today's video. Thank you so much for listening.